Our last 2, 3 lectures, we have discussed about the basic functionalities of Java. Then later on, we have also discussed about that what are the data types, what are the operators, what are the different types of operators. Okay, so in operators, we have gone through like increment, post increment, pre increment operator. Then we have discussed about bitwise operator, then logical. We have also gone through what are the differences between bitwise operator and your logical operators. And then we have also gone through the order of precedence. Okay. In a similar way, we have also discussed about how we are basically storing the value of negative numbers in Java. So that topic is very important. So whenever you are going to just manually, if you want to compute like what is the value of -2 and how it is stored in Java, so it is always stored in the form of 2's complement. Now in this lecture, we are going to discuss about your conditional statements, which are your if else, or we are going to discuss, and the two statements we are going to discuss about your switch statement and your if statement. Okay. So both the conditions, both are known as your conditional statements. It means we are checking the conditions, whether it is true or false like that. Okay. So a conditional statement allows us to choose which statement will be executed. So if it is sometimes called as your selection statement too. Okay. So conditional statement will give us the power to make decision. So if we are in a scenario, if we want to give, okay, if the salary is greater than that, so we are giving basically different kind of choices, okay, to whatever the application we want to create. So over there in today's lecture, we are going to discuss about first if, then else if else, then nested if, okay, then if else if, and as well as switch cases too. So we are going to discuss about all these cases in today's lecture. So if statement, so I think all of you are having an idea about what if statement is. So how we are basically representing a if statement. So if statement is most simple decision making statement. Okay, so it is used to decide whether a certain statement or block of statement will be executed or not. Okay, so this is basically the syntax of a if statement. So whenever you are going to write a program, so after that, what you need to do, you need to write in Java. The syntax is first of all just write if over there. Then whatever the condition you want to write, you just write it down, and then you will go for the statement. So whatever the statement you want to execute, like that. So in Java programming language, whenever you are going to write if statement, it is not mandatory that you have every time you have to write else statement too. So else statement is always optional. Always remember your else statement is always optional. Okay. So in your if statement, your if is basically a Java reserve word. So you cannot use this if in for your variable name. So as I told you that whenever we are selecting any your variable name, so we have to avoid even reserve words too. So we cannot use reserve words for that. Okay. So for that, we've always use if, and as we know that our Java is a case sensitive language, so it should be in your lower case. So both the your characters are in your lower case. So, but whenever we are going to decide if and whatever the condition we are writing it over there, okay. So this condition should give us the result in our Boolean result. It should return. Boolean result means either it return us the true value or false value. Other than that, it will not return. If we are going to write any other value, so let's take an example. If I'm going to write int x is equals to 0, okay, and then later on, if I'm going to write if x is equals to, and then if I'm going to write system.out.println, I'm just writing in the abbreviated form, okay, while it is not going to be accepted by our compiler. Just for our understanding, I'm just writing it. So this is how basically we just write it down if and else statement in our Java programming language. Okay, if I'm going to write high over there. So if I'm going to execute this program, okay, So first of all, I have to create a class. Then inside class, I'm going to create a public static void main method. And inside that, first of all, what I have done, I have declared a variable, and I have also assigned a value. And then later on, I'm just executing or calling a conditional statement, that is our if statement. And inside this if statement, what I'm doing, I'm just assigning the value x over there. And if we are going to execute this code, then we will get an error. Okay, we will get an error if we are going to execute this code. So why we are getting an error? Because as I told you that whenever we are going to execute, okay, whenever we are going to call this your if or any statement over there, so in all the scenario, what will happen? We always, our compiler will always look for true or false value. So if we are going to return, because actually in reality, the value of x is what 0. So it will return 0 over there, and our this condition, okay, this, because you can call it like they have also coded this if statement too, and you can call it like, suppose let's assume it is a function. Okay, so they will look for if, and over there they are passing that argument, the argument which they are passing, either it should be your true value or your false value. But here the value which we are getting it over there is 0. So 0 cannot read or cannot be passed in this function. You can if you want to understand this scenario, so that is why we will get an error. Okay. So whenever you are going to execute any means, if you want to execute this your if statement, so in condition statement, it is mandatory to write either true or false statement. Okay. So for which we generally used your comparison operators. So we have already discussed about all these are what our your comparison operators. Okay, like your equal to, you're greater than equal to, you're less than equal to, you're not equal to. All these are what your assignment, sorry, your comparison operator. So based on these comparison operators, we generally get either true value or false value like that. Okay. So always keep in your mind, if you are going to use x equals to 0, and if you are going to execute this code, you will get an error. Now, second thing, which is very important because sometimes the student generally miss this statement, is that usage of the curly braces. Okay. So the uses of curly braces, what I want to say is that if suppose if I'm going to write true over there, and suppose if I'm going to write system.out.println, and if I'm going to write down Java over here, okay, I just want to print a Java over there. If I'm going to execute this code, I will get the output. In the output window, I will get the output as what your Java is. Okay. Now, if I'm going to remove these curly braces, always remember, if I'm going to remove these curly braces and inside our if your statement, then if we are going to execute our code, we will again get the output Java. So what does it mean? It means that in if statement, even though if you are going to remove these curly braces, okay, so curly braces are optional, but it's but the thing is that when to use and when not to use these curly braces. So only one condition is that, suppose if I'm going to write, I just want to show you, and I just want to write a program on my this over here. Let me open my, where is here. So what I want to say is that, suppose if I'm going to write if true, okay, so my condition is if true. So you know that every time it will always return me this true value. Okay. Then after that, what I am going to do, I am going to write system.out.println, and then again let me again print some statement after this. And if I'm going to print over here, okay, now I'm printing the condition is that hi world. Initially, my first statement is hello world, and second statement of mine is what, hi world. If I'm going to execute this program, okay, if I'm going to execute this program, first of all, just check it out. Okay, so in this program, what happened? I haven't used these curly braces. Okay, I haven't used the curly braces. So what is happening actually in the case of your curly braces? So whatever the condition you have written, okay, so this condition is satisfied. So whenever you are not going to use these curly braces, so it will consider only one statement. Okay, so what I mean to say is that it will only consider this statement inside if statement. And this statement, after that, after this one statement, if we are going to write it down any other statement, so it will not going to consider inside your if statement. So for which I just want to show you, if I'm going to write false over there, so you know that whenever this condition is false, so whatever the board, whatever the content that is there inside our if statement, it is not going to execute it. Okay. So if I'm going to now, if I'm going to, let me again rewrite it like this. If I'm going to execute this program, so the output which I am getting it over there is, see, high word I am getting it. Now, why I'm getting high word over there? Because as I told you that whenever we are not using curly braces, then it will execute only one statement after that. So if you are going to use two, three, whatever the statement after that, it will not consider those statement inside your curly braces. So that is why when to use curly braces, whenever you are having multiple statement, okay, inside your if statement. So right now, if I am going to execute this program, see, now I am going to execute this program. So what will happen? The output which I will get it over there is nothing. Okay. Why I am getting nothing in the output? Because the condition is false and both the statement are inside my if statement. So this statement is very important. So the only difference, so even though if somebody is going to ask you like whether you can use curly braces or not, so you will say that curly braces are optional. But the thing is that whenever you are going to avoid curly braces, then what will happen? Then in that scenario, it will execute only one statement. After that statement, it is not going to execute that statement. Okay. So this is the first case over there. Over there, and here you have to always or try to use some condition which will return me Boolean values, either true value as well as false value. Okay. So this always keep in your mind. And similarly, one more thing which is very important is that suppose, just avoid this statement. Okay. Now if I'm going to execute this statement, and over here in this statement, what I'm doing is I am just declaring the value of int x is equals to 1 over here. Okay. Now, inside if statement, if I'm going to write int x, so right now I am not using curly braces. Okay. So without curly braces, if I'm going to execute this statement, so according to our knowledge, we will say that, okay, it will execute. So let me make it true. Okay. So that you will understand. Even though if we are going to false, so we will get the same result, but still I just want to. Now the condition is true and we don't have curly braces, so it will execute only one statement. The first only one statement it will execute. So that is why it will execute this statement and then it will execute this statement. But the problem or the issue with your without braces, if we are declaring any variable, then what will happen? We will always get an error. Okay, we will always get an error. See, the error which we are getting it over there is variable declaration not allowed here. Okay, so without your curly braces, if we are going to declare any variable after this your if statement, then we will get an error. So in order to sort out this issue, what we generally do, we always put your curly braces. So inside curly braces, if we are going to execute this code, then this exit code will work fine. Okay, so now you can see it over there. We are not getting any error. But without curly braces, we are getting an error. So the reason why we are getting an error in our earlier case, but here why we are not getting it. Okay. So the reason is related to the your variable. Okay. So whenever we are going to write it here, write this statement here, it means Without curly braces, I can execute only one statement after this. Okay, so without curly braces, we can execute only one statement. It means after this statement, I cannot be able to use this variable. Why I cannot be able to use this variable? Because this statement is inside this your if statement. And if statement without curly braces can execute only one statement. So after this, it is not going to execute this. It will not consider this statement inside if statement. So that is why it will give us an error, because after this, because our if condition can only basically use, or you can call it as it can basically execute one statement. That is why it will not consider it. But while in the case of your curly braces, because multiple statement can be considered, okay, because multiple statement can be considered, so it might be possible like inside if statement we might perform some operation based on this value, like x is equals to x plus 1, like that, okay, like this. So our that is why Java compiler is very intelligent. Why it is very intelligent? Because why it is giving us an error? Because it is of no use. Why we are doing it? Okay, so because in future we cannot use this value, okay, even after this scope, because whenever we are going to declare any variable, always remember, whenever we are going to declare any variable inside any curly braces, right now we are using your if statement. Even inside this curly braces, if I'm going to declare int x is equals to, for example, your 5, okay, like this. So the scope, always remember, scope is very important. So the scope of this, let's make it as y. So the scope of this y is within this line of code, okay. After this, if I am going to access the value of y, I cannot access this value of y, okay, always remember. Similarly, in the case of your if statement 2, make it, yeah. Similarly, with respect to your if statement also, the scope, if I'm going to print the value of x after this, okay, let me show you what I'm asking you is that if I'm going to print the value of x outside this your this thing. So scope is again very important. Now, if I'm going to execute the value of print the value of x, so what error I'm getting it? Cannot find the symbol. So see why? Because but according to your knowledge, you will say, okay, we have already declared the value of x is equals to 1, and we have performed x is equals to x plus 1. But still, why we are getting an error over here? Okay, so the reason is the scope of x variable is residing only, we can call or we can use this x variable only inside this your curly braces. We cannot use this variable outside this thing. Okay, so scope is again very important. So that is why when, yes, any question?
Isha, actually, I wanted to ask, when I assign this x in another curly brace, same, and if I used it earlier, like here, integer x equal to 1, and then in another curly braces, so then with the variable will be same in both the curly braces, it will work or not?
Okay, so in that scenario, see again, what I told you is that where you are basically calling this the value of x. Okay, so right now, if I'm going to execute the value of x over there, then it will print me. Let me change the value so that you will get the output over there. So over there, what is happening over here is that where you are basically calling this value. Okay, so actually everything is related to your scope of the variable. Scope of the variable is that if you are going to create a local copy, you can create a local copy, and you can also create a variable before that too. Okay, so no issue at all, but it is always means related to that for which purpose you are using it. Like for here we are getting an error. The error which we are getting is int x is already defined in the method. Okay, so what will happen? Int x, because the scope of x is can be accessed by this if statement too. So that is why we are getting an error. But suppose if I'm going to write same statement over there, then in that scenario we will not get any error. So what I'm telling you is that if I'm again going to write, and here if I'm going to write I over there. Okay. And again, I'm going to write it down. Let's make it as 5 and make it this one. Now, if I'm going to, so right now, what I am having x is equals to 5. Right now, I am having x is equals to 1. So these two x are basically different. Why? Because their scope are different. So I can use this value of x only inside these two curly braces. And the value of this x I can use only inside these two curly braces. I hope you got your answer.
Yes, sir, I got.
They are local variables, right?
Yeah, these are local variables. Okay. So right now I'm not going again in the depth of local variables because it is a separate topic. Okay. But still I'm just telling you is that whenever you are defining any local variable, so it is mandatory that you have to assign some value. What I mean to say is that if I'm going to write int x over there, so I will get an error. Okay. So whenever you are declaring, even inside this public static void main, we whatever the variable we are basically defining it, it is again it is also a local variable. So we are going to discuss about what are local variable, what are your global variables later on, like there is what are static variables, what are your final values, all these things we are going to discuss about. But the thing which you need to understand right now is that the local variable are those variables whose scope are limited to these curly braces. Like for example, here the scope of this x is only inside this. After this, if I'm going to call this variable, so I'm not able to access this the value of that particular variable. Similarly for this case too. So at that moment of time, I can create n number of means x value I can use multiple times for that. Okay, no issue at all. So till now, what we have learned is that related to your if and if condition. If condition is that whatever the condition you are going to write it over there, always keep in your mind that first thing it should return me Boolean value. So how it will return me Boolean value? So we have already discussed if I'm going to write ints, for example, if I'm taking num is equals to 1 and let's assume if I'm taking num2 let's take it as num2 as your 1. Okay, so like this. So if I want to check whether these two numbers are equal, so what I will do, I will use the comparison operator. Okay, let's assume I'm using comparison operator num2 like. So this is how you have to apply, because after executing this expression, if these two values are equal, so it will return me Boolean value only. Okay, so either it will return me true or false. Like for this scenario, it will return me true value. But if I'm going to write like this value, if I'm going to execute this statement num, then it is not returning me either true value or false value. It is basically returning me now 1 over here. So our 1 it is not going to be recognized by our if statement. Okay, so that is why it will give us an error. So that is why this statement is again very important. Okay, so whenever so even if you are not going to use these curly braces, that is okay, but always keep in your mind is that whenever you are going to whenever you are not using these curly braces, so it will execute only one statement after that, this conditional statement. After that, it whatever the statement you are going to write it, so those statements are not basically coming inside this if statement. Okay, and second important thing which we have learned right now is that we cannot declare any variable. Okay, or as I declare any variable inside whenever we are not using any curly braces. So this statement, if I'm going to write it down like int a is equals to 5 over here, so I will always get an error. So in order to do it, if you are going to use it in curly braces, it will work fine. But without curly braces, it will always give me an error. Okay. So this statement is very important. That is why I have told you. Okay. Now after this thing, so this is basically a flow chart. So I think all of you have an idea about flow chart. If not, then I'm just telling you the basic thing is that this is basically a condition. Okay, where you can check this is the representation of your condition. Okay, right now I'm not going in the depth of your flow chart. So if your condition is true, then it will give me the this statement. If false, then whatever the statement we are executing, it will give me the result. Okay. So right now we are just using if statement. That is why if let's assume if I'm writing int x is equals to 5 and your y is equals to 2. Okay. If I'm going to write x is equal to y, and if I'm going to print something as system.out.println the value of x over there, then what is happening? Here I will get 5. 5 is equal to 2. So this condition, it will return me false. So now this condition is false, so it will not execute this code. So that is why we are getting false statement. So that is why, and we haven't written any statement. So what will happen? It will come out from this basically these two curly braces. So it will not execute any statement because we haven't used that part. So in order to consider that particular false case too, so what we generally do, we always go. So let's take one example. So if 2018, so you know that now 20 is greater than 18, so it will give me, it will basically return me true value. So that is why the output which I will get it over there is 20 is greater than 18. Okay. Then in that scenario, like in first statement, what we are checking is that whether this condition is true, then print that execute those statements. But what if you are having a dilemma that suppose if that condition is true, then execute this statement. If that condition is false, then execute that particular statement. So in a similar case, in a single body, how can we write it? So for that, we generally use the statement that is known as your else statement. Again, all these are in your lowercase. Okay, always remember all these are in your lowercase. So if your condition is true, then everything is fine. It will execute this statement. Else, it will execute your second statement. Okay. So this is just an example. So here you can see it over there. I have created a class, and inside my public static void main, what I have done, I have declared one variable int time is equals to 20. So what I have told you is that now the scope of time, okay, now I can use scope anywhere, whatever the place I want to use this time variable. Okay, why? Because the scope of this variable is basically rely from here to here. So this is the scope. But after this, if I'm going to write time, okay, if I'm going to print the value of time, so I will get an error. Why I will get an error? Because the scope of time is only inside these two curly braces. So that is why it is we generally call these variables are your local variables, and it is mandatory. Always it is mandatory that you have to assign, because you will get some questions later on. So it is mandatory that whenever you are assigning some variable, okay, some values inside your for your local variable, so you have to assign some value. So if I'm going to write only int time, and if I'm going to even later on I am assigning it, but not in this line, if I'm not going to assign this value, then what will happen? I will get an error. So always remember, because sometimes in your program you will find that you are just declaring, you are just writing it out like int time over there, and you are thinking of, okay, I will later on I will use it, but you will get an error. So why you are getting an error? For local variable, it is mandatory that you have to assign some value. So the reason is, again, I'm telling you the reason also why I'm if I'm going to write int time inside public static void main, if I'm going to execute means this program, why I am getting an error? Okay, why I am getting an error? So the reason why we are getting an error is because of the default value. Because of the default value. Default values mean for local variables in Java. In Java, for local variables, there are no default values. Okay, always remember, for your in Java, for local variables, only for local variables, okay, there are no default values. So that is why where we know that for int the default value is 0, for float the default value is 0.0, but all these values are not for your local variables. These values, default values, are for our global variables. I will show you, even I will demonstrate you that whenever we are going to write int time inside my public static void main, I will get an error. But if I'm going to make this variable as my global variable, then I will automatically get the value 0 for int, for float 0 0.0, even for double you will get 0 0.0, and for character you will get space. All these values you will get it. Okay, so these are the default values, but default values always and only applicable for your global variables. Okay, global variables. But for local variables, you never have any default values. So that is why we always assign, we have to assign some default values. Okay, and we have to initialize at least some values. So that is why we are not getting an error. Now, so here the time is less than 18. Okay, so this is the syntax. So syntax is very important. First write down if, then use these two braces, and inside braces just write down whatever the statement you want to write, and then use curly braces. So if you want to use curly braces, so right now we have only one statement. So even though if you are not interested, you can even remove these curly braces too. Okay, but what if we are having multiple statement, then always go for what your curly braces. Then I have written else statement over there, and then I have printed like system.out.println your good evening. So if I'm going to execute this code, so what will happen? I will get the output as what your good evening. Why? Because 20 is less than 18. So this condition is what? False. So it will return me false. So that is why I will print, or I will execute this particular statement. Okay. So that is why this statement is very important. Then we also have your else if statement too. Okay, what if you are having multiple if statement? So right now initially we are considering only one condition. If it is true, then print something. In the case of your else, we are using if this condition is true, print this is execute these statement, else execute this statement. But in the case of your else if statement, it gives us the liberty that we can go for multiple means if cases kind of thing. Okay, so what does it mean? That if your condition is true, then print is this statement. Again, you are inside if statement, you are again printing the value, means again you are basically checking the condition else if true. Okay, if this condition is true, then print this statement. If else, print this statement. So block of this code will be executed if condition 1 is true, else it will go and check the condition for this thing. So always remember that your the way our code is basically executed for if statement, first it will check if statement, then it will check for else if statement, and then later on it will check your condition. Last one, that is your else statement. Okay, like this. And if any one of the statement gets matched, okay, so let's assume we have condition 3 also. Let's assume I'm going to write else if. So always remember why this syntax is important. Sometimes a student get confused and they just write else and if without any space. Okay, so I'm just telling you about the basic mistakes while writing the program. So the syntax is there will be a space. Okay, first else, then you have a space, then you have to write if. Okay, and then you just write the condition, and then you will print whatever the statement you want to print. So let's assume if I am going to write one more condition, that is your condition your 3. This is my condition 3. Okay, so let's assume my condition 2 is satisfied. We are satisfying the condition 2. We are not satisfying condition 1. We are satisfying condition 2. Or still, let's assume we are satisfying condition 3 too. Okay, what I want to say is that let's assume we have a program if true. Okay, then inside this we have system.out.println whatever the statement we are executing. Then we have else if, and again it is satisfying the condition, because I have just written true. So true means it will always satisfy my this case too. And I'm just writing SOP over there, whatever the statement I'm printing. And again, if I have written else if, and again this situation, this condition is again true. Okay, so in that scenario, what is the output? Let's assume you are printing A over here, you are printing B over there, and you are printing the value of C over here. So always remember, whenever your if statements and even else if statement are satisfying the condition, then it will go for and check for the first one. If your first statement is satisfied, then it will never ever execute other else if statement. Okay. So you will only get the output A over here. You will not get the output A, B, C, because all the statements are satisfying your whatever the conditions you are having. Okay. So this is again very important. So it will only satisfy only one, the uppermost your or topmost your if is. Like again, for condition two, both are satisfying. So if so, it will execute only statement two. It will not execute statement three. Okay, this is very important. And one more important thing which I have missed is related to empty statement. Okay, so if I'm going to write if if I'm going to write true over there, and if I'm going to use semicolon over there, okay, and if I'm going to execute this statement, so we will not get any error, no error we will get. Okay, so these such kind of statements, if statement, are known as your empty statement. Okay, why we are calling it as your empty statement over here? Because see, inside if statement we don't have any statement. Okay, we have just used semicolon, so it is valid in your Java programming language. So if you want, if in question, if we will give you like you have four options, and your question is whether it is a valid statement if we are going to execute this line of code, so you will say yes, it is true. Why? Because this is an empty statement. So an empty statement, basically they are valid in your whenever we are using if conditional statement. Okay, always remember this point. And I think I've already whatever the cases that are basically related to our if statement, I have considered all those cases. Okay, so let's take one more example of else if statement. So you know that time is equals to 22. So now the value of time is what it will assign the value 22 over there. So it will check 22 is less than 10. So the condition is false. Okay, it will return me false. So it is not going to execute this statement. It will directly jump here in this statement, and then it will check whether my 22 is less than 20. So again, this condition is false. So now it will jump directly here. Okay, so in else we never check any condition. Okay, whatever the conditions that are not going to be matched in our earlier if or else if statement, though so surely we will execute our else statement. So if you are going to execute this code, so the output which you will get it over here is good evening. So the important thing which we should keep in your mind whenever we should use if statement is that first thing is the condition. Whatever the condition you are using it, it should return either true or false. Other than that, if you are not going to use true or false, you will get an error. Second thing is that you can use, or this your curly braces are optional, but there is a condition if you are not using curly braces is that you can execute only one statement after that. Third thing is that you cannot declare anything like any variable inside your if you are not using any curly braces. Okay, and other than that, you know about how, and in else if there is a blank space. So all these things which you need to keep in your mind. And one more thing is your empty statement. Okay, so if I'm going to write, yes.
सर ये मतलब अगर कर्ली ब्रेसेस नहीं लगाएंगे तो जैसे सिस्टम डॉट आउट डॉट प्रिंट के बाद ये इफ एल्स इफ भी है तो उसको भी मतलब एग्जीक्यूट नहीं करेगा ये
No, no, no. In that scenario, it will execute. Why? See, it will execute, but it will because see, whenever your condition are going to be checked, okay, so it will check for all your statements. So suppose अभी हमारे ये if के अंदर तुमने statement one, statement two, or statement for example three statements if you have written, okay, so it will execute only statement one over there. Okay, so yeah, in that scenario अगर तुम यहाँ पर इसको remove भी करते हो, got it, so it will directly go through your else if statement. So you can use it, it will consider it, but it can consider only one statement after that. Okay, got it. You could just try to test it out. What are the other permutation combination you can apply it, but you can only apply only one statement. After that, it will execute only one statement. Got it? Okay. Then we have one more statement for in order to check out your condition. That is your switch statement. Again, switch statement is very important. Why this statement is very important? Because when we use switch statement, first thing is that when we use your switch statement. So switch statement we generally use if you have several conditions. Okay. So let's assume right now if we are using if else if condition, for example, and what you need to do, you need to write if let's assume if x is equal to 1, then execute first statement. Else if x is equals to 2, then execute this statement, and so on, like that. So every time you have to write all these line of code. But whenever you are having multiple, you can say that condition, whenever you are having several cases or several conditions, so it is better to go for switch statement. First thing is that the readability of your code gets increased, because in switch statement it's quite easy to understand what that particular code is. And second thing is that the way basically our the switch bytecode, okay, switch bytecode will take lesser time to execute in comparison to your if statement. Okay, so the way they have written the bytecode of switch statement, because you already know that whenever we are going to compile a code, it will convert it into a bytecode. So the bytecode of switch statement are more optimized in comparison to your if else if statement. So that is why whenever you are having several conditions, okay, so always go for what your switch statement. Now what so in switch statement we know that how we are going to, why we are using it. So whenever you are having several conditions, okay, so it is also known as a multi-way branch statement. So it provides an easy way to dispatch execution to different parts of your code based on the value of expression. So the switch expression is evaluated only once. So the value of expression is compared with the values of each case. If there is a match, the associated block of code is executed, and the break and default keywords are optional. So here we are going to discuss about what do you mean by break and what do you mean by default. So this is the syntax of our switch statement. Okay. So inside this switch statement, you can see it over there. First of all, you have to use this keyword switch. So again, it is in your lowercase. So whenever you are going to use this switch statement, always keep in your mind that it should be in your lowercase. Okay. Then whatever the expression you want to write. Okay. So generally, what expression we will call over here, we will see. Okay. Like what expression we can pass it over there. Then after that we have to write. So again, these are what your keywords you have to use, like case, whatever the. So generally we use over here either literals or we use your constant values, constant variables. Okay, constant values or variables we generally use over here. Other than that, if you are going to use some variables, okay, then in that scenario we will get an error. So I will give you those. I will tell you about those cases too. So first of all, just let's check it out, the syntax of switch statement. First write down just switch, then just write down whatever the expression you have, then just write it down case. So it is mandatory to write case. Okay, if you are going to write just x over there, then you will get an error. So it is mandatory to write case over there, then just write whatever the case you want to write. Okay, x, we are going to discuss about this thing also. Then you have to whatever the code you want to implement. Okay, so here you have to use these colon also, remember these colon. So if you are not going to write colon, again you will get an error. Then you have to write a statement. Then here you can use break statement too. I will tell you about what is the meaning of break. Then similarly, if you have multiple cases, based on that you can use. Other than that, you can also use default also. Okay, so what do you mean by break and what do you mean by default over there? Okay, so let's take, I think we have one example. So from that example I will explain you. Yeah, So here we have an example. So in this example, let's take what I have done. I have taken a variable of integer data type named as day. The value is what? Your 4. Okay, the value is 4. Now I have used which conditional statement? Switch statement. I haven't used if statement over here. Okay, so I have used a switch statement, and inside the switch statement, the expression which I have passed is that I've just passed this day variable. So even though you can pass any variable, or if you want, you can pass an entire expression too. Okay, so I have passed a day variable, and this day variable is of, you know, that it is of your integer data type. Okay, and the value of day, you already know that it is of 4. So after that, you have used these curly braces. So curly braces are mandatory. Always remember, like in the case of your if statement, your curly braces are what? Your optional. But in the case of your switch statement, your curly braces are mandatory. So if you are not going to use curly braces, okay, so you will get an error. Always remember, always keep in your mind that whenever you are going to use switch statement, you should the switch contain inside this, it should contain curly braces. Okay, now after that, you have to write case. So as I told you that this is a your what it is a keyword which you need to use. Then you can use even constant variable. Only you can use constant variable. Okay, constant variable. Again, I'm just telling you about this concept about constant variable right now. Why I am telling you? Because it is required over here. Okay, but later on I will tell you about the entire concept. So can I say that the value, this day variable, can anyone tell me about that day is a constant variable or not? It is constant or not? Can anyone tell me whether it is this day is equals to 4 is constant or not?
Constant, sir.
It is,
Okay.
sir.
So
Constant.
most of you and all of you are saying me that day is a constant. But because you are saying that, okay, we have assigned a value 4 over there, that is why my day is a constant variable. But in programming, okay, always remember, my day is not a constant variable. Why day is not a constant variable? I will tell you. If I am going to write over here after this line, let's assume after this line or inside this statement, if I'm going to write day is equals to 5, can I write it? Yes, I can write it. Means I can change the value of 4 to 5 or whatever the changes I can make. So it means that I can change the value of day over there. I can change the value inside my variable day. Okay. So it means that this value, this variable is not a constant variable. Okay. Always remember. So like all of you, your concepts, the way you have given me the answer is that, okay, we have assigned a day equals to 4. That is why and it is assigned some value, so it is a constant variable. No, it is not a constant variable. Why? Because later on I can change the value of day. I can make days equals to 6 after like this line of code. Even after this switch statement, anywhere I can change the value of day equals to 6. So what do you mean by constant variable is that once you have defined the value day is equals to 4, then later on, even though if I'm going to write day equals to 5, okay, I will get an error, or I cannot change the value day equals to 4. Okay, so that is why in Java programming language, I'm just telling you about one more keyword. That keyword is your final keyword. Okay,
Sir,
yes.
sir, if this is so, then no variable would be constant.
Yeah, that is why no variable is constant. Okay, so that is why I'm telling you that how to make a variable constant. Okay, so how to make a variable constant? You have to use a keyword that is known as your final keyword, and using this keyword you will make a variable constant. What I mean to say is that if you are going to write final and int day is equals to 4, even you after this lecture you can just try it in your system too. This is my final int day equals to 4. What does it mean? Now the value of day is 4 and I cannot change this value. And later on, if I'm going to make day is equals to 5, let's assume, and now I want to update the value day equals to 5. So what will happen? I will get a compile time error, and the error is that this variable is a constant variable, and you cannot change the value of a constant variable. Okay, always remember that whenever your variable is a final variable. Okay, so the syntax which you need to write in order to make a variable as a constant is that you have to write final, then you just write whatever the thing you want to write, like int day equals to 4. Now this variable will become your constant variable. Now this variable I can use for my cases, always remember. But if I'm going to say that can I write case day over here, so I will get an error. So what error I will get it? Because this is not a constant or it is not a literal. Okay, so this error I will get it. So instead of that, either I will use some constant variable, okay, like day equals to 4, final int day equals to 4, or I will use these literals like your 1, 2, 3, 4, all these cases are like that. Okay, so all these are what your constant values. Now you cannot change 3, 4. So basically all literals values are what your constant, because we are not assigning it these value in any variable right now. Okay, so this is very important. Now
तो सर इसको स्विच भी नहीं कर सकते, मतलब केसेस में अगर इसको फाइनलाइज कर दिया तो इसको स्विच भी नहीं कर पाएंगे?
no, you can use it. See, what you are saying, you are asking me is that if I am going to use a final int day equals to 4, this is your question, huh?
Yes sir, yes sir.
And yeah, and if you are saying that in right now, if you are going to execute this code, so why? So we are not changing the value of day. See, हम कोई डे की वैल्यू को चेंज थोड़ी ना कर रहे हैं, हम तो डे की वैल्यू को चेक कर रहे हैं. Got it? We are not assigning any value on day. We are not writing day equals to 1. We are just checking. What we have a memory of day. Let's assume over there we have day equals, this is equals to 4. Let's assume we have make this thing as your constant, okay, only. And right now if we have cases, okay, like case 1 is something like day over there, okay, like this. So suppose we have some expression over there, day plus 1 over there, day plus 2. So you can use these expressions, but always keep in your mind that these should be your constant values. Okay, always keep in your mind. So you can use this case. In that scenario, you will not get any error right now. Okay, even I will demonstrate you, no need to worry, I will demonstrate you all the cases. I will code it and I will show you that what are the possible cases. You can write it down. So the thing is that you can use it, you will not get any error. Okay, but you will get error only whenever you are going to update the value day equals to day plus 1. Suppose if I'm going to write day equals to day plus 1 over here, then in that case I will get an error. But if I'm going to write day plus 1, then I'm not updating the value of day. I'm just incrementing the value day plus 1. So again, I will get the constant value. Okay, so I will always get what a constant value like that.
ये जो फाइनल कीवर्ड है ना सर, उसको बाद में भी यूज कर सकते हैं इन डे इक्वल टू 4
No,
और
no,
बाद
no,
में
no.
अगर
You cannot use it. Okay. So always remember, you cannot use. So these are known as your access modifier. Like we have discussed about the public, private. So till now we have used only public keyword. Okay. Public static void main. So similarly, we have generally we call it as non-access modifier. So these are like your strict FP final. We are going to discuss about later on, but this is very important. That's why I told you. And you cannot use this final keyword after int. You have to use it before this your integer
सब
data.
सब पहले वेरिएबल बना लिया int day equal to 4 and after that we want to make it constant, so is it possible?
No, 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 no. You cannot make it. Only at the time of declaration or whenever you are assigning some value, then only you can make a variable as final. Otherwise, you will get an error. Okay. Only at that time you have to means make that particular variable as what your final. Later on, you cannot make it as constant. Okay.
Okay sir.
Okay. So let's take this scenario. Right now, just forget about final keyword right now. Okay. So just take this case. Now we have a day variable is equals to 4. Now we are just checking the condition. Okay. Day in my RHS, let's assume. So it is like this. is equals to day. Okay, let's take, so 1 is equals to day. For my first case, it is checking like that. 1 is equals to 4. No, the condition is false. 2, now 2 is equal to day. No, again it is false. 3 is equals to day. Again it is false. 4 equals to day. Yes, this condition is true. Once this condition is true, then what will happen? It will execute this block. Okay, so whatever the statement we are writing inside this your case 4, it will execute that statement. You can write multiple statements too. Okay, so right now I'm just showing you one statement, but it's not like that you can write only one statement. You can write 5, 10, n number of statement you can write inside case, and then you are going to use this break. What this break will do, it will terminate this entire switch statement. Now my entire switch statement gets terminated, and I will just get the output as what your Friday. So Friday is the only output I will get it out from here. Okay, now let's take one more case. If I'm going to write day is equals to 11. Okay, I have taken int day is equals to 11 instead of day equals to 4. The value of day equals to 11. So what it will do, it will check the value. 1 is equal to 11. No, condition is false. So this condition is false, this condition is false, this condition. So all the cases, the conditions are false. Okay, so what it will return, it will return nothing. Okay, it will return nothing. So it is not like that every time all the cases will meet. So that is why in this switch statement we also used one more case that is known as your default case. Okay, so you can while these two are not equivalent to each other, but right now from our present context we can say that your default is equivalent to your else statement. What our else statement will do, when all the cases are not going to be we are not satisfying the condition, then always execute else statement. We have also gone through it. Okay, so similarly in your switch statement, let's assume when our all, okay, time is over. Okay then.
Sir,
Okay, now I am going to end this session. Yeah,
sir,
thank you.
one doubt.
Yeah, tell me.